because if you look, there's an R letter there. The R letter that is separated by apostrophe does regarded that this is a inline source code. We are including our code. So whatever, if for example, if we created a data set, it's called smaller data set in the code chunk. So we can use it. We can refer it in line text. And think about it in a way you have some global variables like model number or labels for different figures. You can define it as globally and you can use it later on. So to achieve reproducibility, to reduce the human errors there. Does it make sense so far? Okay. And I'm going to render the first document, and we will take it from there. So let me open RStudio here and create just if you go, is it okay? I think it's big enough. So if we select created a new file, if we just scroll down to Quarto document, if we click on the Quarto document, it's going to ask you a bunch of questions here. I'm going to just say the title is CTSI and nothing else, really. I'm just going to do a vanilla one and create this one. So you will have it again. You will have the YAML header. You will have some markdown syntax here. And you will have the code chunks. If we just render this, let me save it, CTSI. And here we go. We got an HTML file, and you can have a different format. And I will talk more about the how you can render different formatting. I want to point out here, if we go to the terminal here, actually the background jobs. So if we look out here in this highlighted statement here, again, it's because Quarto is not a library, a package in R, it's a software by its own. So you can see here, it's invoked, if you're using RStudio, it was invoked by a background job with the Quarto and the preview command with the file itself. So this is how Quarto really works. RStudio make it easier to work with it. And there is also a different IDE if you prefer. If you don't prefer RStudio, there's many others. You can look those up on the Quarto reference page. Going back to my slides. So yeah, again, I'm pointing out this is the Quarto preview, and you can do it as whatever you want. But this is how RStudio do it for you. But if you prefer to work with the command line, or if you are in a server that does not have any GUI, you can work it on the command line to create your documents. Let's take just breath before we get into the hands-on, and let's ask questions. Get questions, answers, thoughts, feelings. Okay. Now I think Emma will teach us how we can play with Quarto and produce some HTML PDF. And I will get back to you after that. Okay. So I'm not sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
So is my interface big enough? I don't want to hurt any eyes. Good, excellent. So as Mutaz mentioned, we felt like the best way to introduce everyone to Quarto was to do some hands-on demo instead of just throwing some slides at you. So as Mutaz mentioned, we both work with Quarto via the RStudio interface, but that does not mean that you need to. The other thing that I want to mention is I think we were a little ambitious in what we wanted to cover for our course material, But fear not, if there's anything that we do not cover on our repo on GitHub, we have, or I've put on an example of what I hope to cover today with some notes and some references that will give you some tips and hints on how to accomplish everything. So, okay, the other just housekeeping thing I wanted to mention is that we are assuming you may have worked with R, maybe a little bit of R Markdown, but never with Quarto. So this is really meant as an introduction to for someone who has never touched a document. So as we just saw Mutaz make a new document, I'm going to open that up. And we've mentioned that at Gilead, we use Quarto to generate our pharmacometric reports, but you can render 40 different types of documents. Not only that, in all of our capacities, whether that's as a pharmacometrician, a teacher, or a student, there's a lot of utility in using Quarto. So if you're a teacher and some of your coursework involves R, Quarto would be great to use for lessons. If you work with collaborators, which I think we all do, and you want to share something that maybe is not as formal as a presentation, but still show your work, again, Quarto is great to use. And for our students out there who work with non-mem, for example, keeping track of models and what you do or don't do can sometimes be difficult. I know we have Piranha, but that's not always what people prefer to work with. So Quarto can solve that for you. For example, we thought that maybe as a student, this could be a lab notebook. So we're going to kind of go under the premise that maybe we want to use Quarto as our lab notebook. So that's what I'm going to title this. It's going to be our lab notebook. And in order to make sure that you can reproduce all of the activities we do today, we're just going to use the Theophylline dataset. I'm going to put all of us at CTSI as authors, and we're going to start with an HTML document, but we'll practice rendering PDF and Word documents, since those are very common formats that we all might want to use. Okay. So as Mutaz kindly mentioned, when you open up a Quarto document similar to Markdown, the developers have kindly given us a little bit of a skeleton to work with. I'm going to start at the top with the header and kind of work our way down, filling things in. So similar to our Markdown, we do have this YAML header. So everything in between these 3 dashed lines dictates the formatting for our document. And everything that we put in this header is a global setting that will apply to the whole document. But if you have, for example, a code chunk for R where you want to use different settings, you can override these global settings. Now, the list of features for these headers are kind of unlimited. And so when you're first getting started, I definitely recommend give it a quick Google. As Mutaz said, the Quarto document has a lot of the Quarto website has a lot of documentation. So if you're interested in knowing what your options are for the headers, you can see that the list goes on for days. But some common ones that we might want to add is we have a title, we have an author. I think it's pretty common that we might want a date associated with this. And I'm just going to use today's date. The one thing I want to note is that for YAML, the syntax works in that we have a key, then we have a space, and then we have our value. Now, YAML is very fussy, similar to non-mem, when it comes to syntax. So if you don't indent properly, if you forget a space, it is going to throw up an error. But thankfully for us, one of the kind of new tools that is present in Quarto is that we have what's called YAML intelligence. So for example, if I wanted to add a table of contents to my document, you can see that as I start to type, Quarto understands or is taking a guess at what I want, So it can autofill, and then I can have my options. The other thing I wanted to mention is that for some of the options in the YAML header, it's not going to be available for use in all the different types of formats. So for example, in HTML, we can have a table of contents, but we can't have a list of figures. We can still add this option, but it just won't show up. However, if we change our format to PDF, then this will show up. So here are some examples of kind of what you might add for what I like to think of as your title page. An example of kind of a global formatting feature that you might think about adding is if we are going to have kind of any type of code where we're going to be executing that, we probably don't want to have any warnings in our output that we're sharing with colleagues. And you also might want to remove any errors from your output. And so by setting this as a global setting, none of my code chunks should display this. Now, this is just a quick example of some line items that you might add, but as we work through this document and we look at the outputs, we might find that we need to add some more features here. The other thing that I forgot to mention, which I want to do so now, is that in Quarto, and this is true for our Markdown in the more recent versions, we have two ways to interact with Quarto. So right now, I'm in the visual mode. And for those of you who are just starting to learn Quarto, I highly recommend that you start here. This is the more user-friendly kind of way to interact with that. And that's because we have this handy dandy toolbar right here. So when it comes to making quick kind of formatting changes, so making some text bolded or italicized, we can just at the click of a button implement that. But for those of you who are very familiar with our Markdown or maybe are more comfortable with kind of just seeing the code, you can also go to the source mode. So the source mode I like to think is a little bit more advanced in that we lose our toolbar. So the expectation is when you're working in this mode, you understand the syntax well enough that you can accomplish each of the formatting or insertion tasks that you want with the Quarto syntax. I think that having these two options is great for learning though, because we can make changes in the visual mode and then go to the source mode, toggling back and forth to see what changes to learn the syntax. So for example, I made Quarto as a bold text. So we can see that to accomplish that, we need to have double asterisks around the text that we want bold, and for italicized, only one. And so Mutaz kindly rendered a document. I'm just going to call this lab.
That this is a markdown syntax rather, not a Quarto-specific syntax. It's a markdown syntax that you can use individual or the source, at least in the document itself. But as Emma said, like with RStudio did implement the visual capabilities for to deal with markdown and to make it easier to write documents.
Thank you, Mutaz. So if we render this document really quickly, we can see the changes in terms of we have a lab notebook title, we have our author, and we have our date. Now we haven't really changed the text too much, so this is going to look similar. If we want to take a look at a PDF, we just need to change the format here and give it a quick render. So one of the things you can see is that this is a small document, so it's very fast. And by viewing your output in the same interface, it's very nice for kind of seeing what changes you may or may not want to make. So this is what it would look like if we have a PDF. So you can note that we have our list of figures here, whereas before we didn't. And then lastly, if we want to do a Word document, let's see if this is going to work. The format is docx. So one thing to note, I know that a lot of companies especially love a good Word document so you can have track changes and all that jazz. When you're working with Quarto, I would say that the ability to render a Word document is a little bit more rudimentary than rendering towards an HTML or a PDF. So it's pretty easy to actually break the ability to render into Word. So do keep that in mind. And so I'm going to just change this back to HTML. And let's start to get into our text. So now that I've removed everything, I want to put together a skeleton. So let's start to put together that. I'm going to go to the header section. I'm going to get us started. I am just going to put the first global header as notebook 1. And I'm going to put a smaller header. Let's call this background. Now I want to add 2 more headers, but I'd love to get some audience participation. If this is a lab notebook, what other kind of global header would we like in this? Any volunteers? Just shout out a suggestion. Okay. I usually put that at the end of my document, so I'm going to put that down one. And let's get one more going. Can I have one other suggestion? There's no right or wrong answer to this one. It's really easy. Come on, guys. This is your lab notebook. What other thing do you want? Ooh. Okay, so we got experimental design. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so one quick note. This is our first and our second source headers. If we go back to the source mode, you can see that the way we create the headers is based off of the hashtags. So the first header, you only get 1, and as we go down, we just add more hashtags. The other thing I want to mention, which is a big advantage of using a document like Quarto, is cross-referencing. So if there's something in the background that we want to reference in the experimental design, the way we go about doing that is you can see that this little pop-up button with 3 dots appears. So if we click on that, we have an option to kind of customize this section. So what I'd pay the most attention to is this ID. So this is what we'd use to do our cross-reference, where they've given us our syntax. So I'm going to call this intro. We have a lot of flexibility where we can make this whole section a different color. We can format it into 2 columns, 1 column, whatever you would like based off of these other attributes. But right now I'm going to keep it pretty simple. So we're going to add that, and we can see that it appears. So for example, if we want to cross-reference it like I mentioned, you can go into Insert, Cross-Reference, and it pops up automatically when we've done the syntax appropriately. If you make a mistake, then it will not pop up here, so take another look. And you can see that in order to cross-reference something, all we need to do is at our ID. So if we give this a render just very quickly to take a look at what it appears, you can see we have our skeleton going, and we have our section, but we're missing our table of contents. So one thing that's very important is that in order to cross-reference something, especially when it comes to the PDF format, is we need to add one extra line of code to our YAML header, which is our section, sorry, it is number sections. So we need this to be true in order to get our table of contents and cross-reference for a PDF. So if we pop that out, now you see we get our table of contents. Yeah, so you have to move the viewer over quite a bit for it to pop up. The other thing you can do is the default for the table of contents location is on the right. If you change it to the left, then that can also make it more apparent in your document. Well, it was supposed to. But that reminds me, if you have questions throughout this little demo, please just ask them. So if we want to go in and start kind of filling in our text, one of the things that we can do is I'm just going to cheat and I'm going to copy and paste some text so we can see what that looks like. I'm going to add that to our background. And because we are excellent scientists, we are going to just make a reference to where we got that information from. So we can add a link. And if we just type in the URL, it will appear in our document. Now, if for whatever reason you don't want to use the URL, then one of the things that we can do is we can rename it in the text section. And if we rename it in the text section, we can call it maybe source, and that's how it's going to appear. So that can help clean up your document and make it look nice. Then the other thing that we oftentimes do is we will have a separate document to render our figures and tables and import them into our reports. We'll also go through if we want to make an inline plot, but let's start with the easier of the two, which is inserting a figure. So we can go to our figure button. We're going to browse for some figures, and I'm going to insert the chemical structure of theophylline. Now, what's very important when we're kind of doing these figures, both importing and inline, is we need to have a caption. So this is going to be the title of your figure legend. And then again, we're going to go to attributes, and we want to be able to cross-reference this image in this case. So again, we need to give it an ID. When we give figures an ID, we need to make sure that it has fig as the beginning part. And for tables, it's TAL. So we can see, I'm just going to call this fig struck. And so we get that in our document. I'm going to render that really quick so we can see what the document looks like. And I'm going to pop it out so we can see full screen. So you can see that we have our nice text, we have a link to the source, and we have our image in this case. Now, one of the beauties of Quarto is that it is very customizable. So this is the bare minimum of what we would need to do to get an image. But you can see that it is going to give us an option to kind of change the size of the image or of a figure. And we can also change the location of it within the document. So we can put it on the left, the center, the right, you name it. Now, in the interest of time, we're going to go through this a little bit quickly. But now that we've imported an image, let's talk about using R to make our own inline. So there are many ways that you can start a chunk of code. You can do this slash to get one, or you can go up here and insert. Now, for those of you who are familiar with R Markdown, this is going to look very familiar and comfortable, but I want to point out some notable differences. So in R Markdown, typically when we have special formatting requirements for our code chunks, so for example, echo, you might be used to putting it in the brackets up top. For Quarto, the syntax is not to put it here. It will allow it, but that's not technically how you're supposed to do it. So with Quarto, what we do is similar to our YAML header, is we have multiple lines that each have a command. And for Quarto, I'm going to introduce you to a new term, which is the hash pipe. And this is how we delineate each of our formatting settings. So for example, this chunk is one that we want to make a figure in. So similar to what we did up top with our image, I want to add a label, which is equivalent to the ID. So here is where we're going to put what we want to call this plot. So I'm just going to call it PK. The other thing that we need to add is a caption. So I'm just going to call this Theophylline PK profile. And one of the nice things is it's a little bit annoying to keep on typing the hash pipe every single time because you might have a lot of different settings that you want to implement. But similar to YAML intelligence, Quarto, assumes that we want to keep on adding formatting settings. And so it will automatically just put that hash pipe, which is pretty nice. So as I mentioned, we are going to be working with the Theophylline dataset. So I'm going to load that really quickly. And then let's make just a very simple ggplot. If you are not familiar with ggplot or R coding, that is completely acceptable. Just stay tuned for tomorrow when Sam discusses this. But really quickly, I'm just going to load my data. And then what I want to plot is I want to do concentration versus time. And I'm going to get slightly fancy in that I want to color this by each of my subject IDs. I'm a big fan of making my plots have both a point and a line to connect them. And then for my points, I'm just going to make them a reasonable size and slightly transparent to make sure that there's no overlap in my data. And then I like to make my plots pretty whenever I can. So I'm just going to add a few additional formatting features. And I am just going to make sure that my axes look like they have a decent title with some units. Okay.
Yeah, people who does not know R, don't worry. Sam will teach you tomorrow about it. So
So whenever working with text inline, one of the recommendations I do want to make as someone who is atrocious at spelling is it's very easy to make a mistake. And if you make a mistake and you go to render, then sometimes you have to wade your way through all of the output to try to decipher where the error occurred. In order to prevent that from happening, I highly recommend that you run the code in your chunk. So that way, if there's an error, you detect it right here and kind of can troubleshoot it before rendering. So we have a plot, and I'm pretty happy with this. So let's give it a render. Oop. Yep. So that's exactly, my R was yelling at me because I did not load my library. So let's give this a try number 2 and take a look. Okay, so now you see we have our code and we have our plot with our title. So we're gonna, when I look at this, I can think of kind of 2 modifications maybe we'll want to make. So let's experiment with including this code or not, and then also cross-referencing this figure just to make sure everything was specified correctly here. So let's start with the easier of the 2. So if we want to insert a cross-reference, you can see that it pops up. Perfect. And then so one very common option is our echo. So there's true and false, which I think we're all familiar with. One of the newer features is fenced. And so if you are rendering a document that's more for teaching, I actually highly recommend that you use the fenced option. So if we look at before, keep a mental picture of this code. This is when echo equals true. But when we change it to fenced and we render this real quick, what you can see is that now we get all of our customized features that we included or specified in our code chunks. So if someone needs to replicate what you did, or you added some fancy feature you're proud of, so you want to let everyone know, this is a great option to facilitate that. And we can just give a quick render for a PDF to see what this looks like. While Quarto is doing its thing, are there any questions? Yeah. There are definitely options where instead of, or at least what I'm familiar with, is instead of using an R chunk, there's certain options to be able to make the code interactive. I myself have not done that yet.
Okay, so it's going to be made. Okay, that would be neat for teaching purposes. Thanks.
Yeah.
So Quarto offer this very nice interactive dashboards. So you can do all that.
Awesome. Thanks.
It's in the new version. So that's why I told you if you want to use it, install the new version because it do have something called Quarto dashboards, which is very, very interactive.
Yes. So when you render to a PDF, the rendering involves LaTeX. And so you need to make sure that you have the packages, which is tiny text. Now, when you have that, you can see that this is our document. So we have our nice table of contents, and we have our list of figures, which are linked to each of our figures. And so in the interest of time, I think I'm going to pass this back over to Mutaz in a second. So hopefully what we've shown you today is that with very minimal experience, you can actually do quite a bit in Quarto. And what we focused on here is just making a document but Mutaz is going to talk about making presentations. And for both making documents and presentations, one huge advantage of Quarto that we haven't mentioned yet is that you no longer have to copy and paste figures. Once you update the figure, if you re-render the document, it's going to re-render with any updates that you made. So as modelers, we're always kind of in an iterative process. So this makes our lives a lot easier, not having to constantly copy and paste. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over.
We have one online question about demonstrating a PMX workflow from start to beginning. I think that needs more than 1 hour, but we have we did a workshop in RN Pharma. It should be on YouTube. So yeah, that one would be more interactive in terms of how to create reports from scratch. But please send me an email. We can talk more about it. So, thank you, Emma, for presenting all this work. One thing I just want to talk about before going into slides or customizing your document, the cross-referencing and how to modify cross-referencing. I know some, at least universities, companies, they do have different formatting options. Instead of calling it section, calling it chapter, or instead of calling it chapter, like figure, and it should be called fig or not figure. So you can modify this as well. So, and if we are looking here in the CTI SIQMD document and creating a section, reference for this section. And again, as you notice, and as Emma mentioned, the sections start with the prefix of sec, SEC, the figure start with a fig, and table TPL. And if we want to modify this, for example, if we you can use it as a regular way by using sec, Quarto, and if you render it, you will get that section 1.1. But if you want to access the default and change this default, you need to fence it. Fence it in a close brackets, and you can write down, I'm going to call it, what do I call it? Chapter. I called chapter before, but let me call it part. And what you can do is also add the sec Quarto, which is referring to that element itself, but also you need to add minus sign. So the minus sign here will override the default. And when you render this document, if we are looking here, it's now having a part here that's referring to it. It's not section anymore. The default is section, but you will have the ability to access these defaults and change it. So this is why I like about Quarto, it's the customizability. You can have a lot to be customizing, to the customization there. The other thing, and you will use it a lot, is the references. Emma mentioned about the cross-referencing, but I'm sorry, I missed it. Emma, did you talk about the inserting BIP preferences? Okay, so the one element of how to insert your references, really, all your references you have for your thesis, hundreds of references, or if you want, as Emma did, copied some text and she want to reference that paper. Also, individual mode, you can have that. You can you can able to reference anything. So I'm gonna reference any part of the document here. If I put my mouse here, and if I click Insert Citation, if you click Citation, so this nice thing here that you can look for citation, even from DOI, Crossref, DataCite, PubMed, and R packages. So I'm gonna go for R packages here and pick up a package. So yeah, I'm gonna just take the one for bootstrapping and insert. So by default, it's gonna insert, but not only this, so it's gonna create auto-generate for you a reference.pip. And anything you add more references, this is gonna just be writing it to this document here that will all keep appending any references that you will use later on in your analysis. I'm just gonna go for this. Oh, sorry. Yep. So Quarto in general do have also the extension functionality, where you can create extension and you can modify it and customize it as you want. And this is your own format. You can build it upon PDF, you can build it upon HTML, you can build it upon Beamer, which is PDF slides, or other things. And that's your own extension that you can share it, people can use it. And you can add by those extension not only for document appearance, for some of the functionality you want to do during the rendering. This is what also extension can do. And it's very easy to install it by using the command line, either Quarto add extension or use the template. There's difference between those two. The extension, usually you want only the document that I want to use. When you use Quarto use template, you want to pull everything together. You probably want to do some modification to that template that you liked on GitHub, for example. You want to do some modification and you want to use it on your own. You can pull it up, customize it, and push it back. Here's a list of those extensions that being developed by Quarto, and there's really a lot of different extension. You can have extension for manuscripts, for different journals, statistical journal archives, or really a lot of different formatting in addition to the HTML or some of the Quarto functionality. And we can just use it again for even you can do it Quarto add extension or Quarto use template. Here's the basic extension for Indiana. So we just created a simple slides that can be used for Indiana. I'm just gonna go over it, see what we can see in extension. So if I'm actually the easiest way to create an extension. So for example, Sam want to create a slides or PDF report, right? And you want to start just by whatever the default is. So you can just do Quarto, create template. And you have two options, projects, extension. We are not going to talk about projects. It's really very large topic for Quarto, but you can select the extension because it's an interactive document. I'm going to make it bigger because I even can see it. And you have, even you want it as a shortcode, filter. This is what Lua abilities is. Lua that goes inside Pandoc and do some modification. Reveal.js is the slide formatting, and you can have it a journal or custom format. So you can pick up any of those. If I pick journal format, you can name the extension, test extension. And here we go. You created that, and that opens automatically by other RStudio. And the extension, what you see in the extension here is you will have an extension folder that takes all the or this is what under the hood is. Because of this is a journal article, it will give you a template for bibliography. that is your citations, and the template here. This is one of templates for some of the journals, and if we just render it without doing anything, so you will have it here as just a vanilla document here. Now, I want to point out what we can see in the extension folder here, that we will have an extension YAML and a bunch of other files. Extension here is whatever you put in the YAML header that you want it as a global environment. You want them there. You don't want anyone to play with them, right? That should be our fixed point here in terms of you want table of contents, you want some filters, and you want like specific PDF options to be rendered in your document. So this is very, very, very overview on how extension. I'm going to now circle back to Indiana University CTSI slide deck. So if we go here, slides, I create something called Quarto.io Reveal.js slides. So if we picked up this and looking whatever we see here in the template.qmd, we can see we have the title, we have the format, and the format now it's not PDF or HTML. We can see it's the extension name. So that's why what I told you, you can create your own formatting based on that. So it's gonna go with the whatever the formatting that take it from the extension.yaml. And you can do the other different YAML header that Emma talked about. So if we render this, looking at it in just a regular way, I'm just going to put it in a large one here. So this is just a slideshow where this is Reveal slideshow. It's called Reveal.js, which is built on JavaScript, and it's really flexible and a nice a way to present. So again, this one, or yeah, I'm gonna talk about it in a bit. All the, whatever you see here, I'm just gonna talk about. I want to show you the overview of those slides, how they will look like. So please hold that thought. So yeah, we have those like header. It's really it's a markdown syntax. You are not doing anything for using JavaScript or HTML. It's a markdown syntax that will convert later into an HTML. And the other thing I want to show here, how you can insert code. And if you are teaching in a class, and as we saw Ryan yesterday, you can highlight the code. You like if you are teaching a class and you want to point out to a specific function there or to a specific point, you can do highlighting the code. And it's also going to be incremental. So we finished with one, we can go to the next one with highlighting specific parts of those elements here. So let me go back now and dig into those extensions. Okay, so if we go to the files here, again, we can see the same extension structure. We have the underscore extension folder. We have the template.qmd. Those are the important one for this slide. Let's go inside the extensions here, and we will have an extension YAML and the picture or the logo for CTSI and some customization for CSS, which is that give customization to HTML. So if we open the extension.yaml here, this information, it's really not about the document rather than the author for this slide or for the extension itself. So if you add your name here and it does not appear in that, don't worry, it's because this is not related to the slide rather than the extension itself. And usually Quarto required, I usually go with 1.3 because 1.5 is still not there yet. At least this is the development version, but the current release or the stable release is 1.4, which is the one I highly recommend to start using. And we have the formats here, and we are using Reveal.js, and this is the slide. You can have theme. There's a different themes that you can use, and I'm going to show you here. And I'm going to create a new Quarto.org. And actually, a nice thing about their website, they have something called Fuzzy Finder. So if you start typing here, they're going to start looking what the matching, at least your text, anything matching. So if I say reveal JS themes, which is appeared at the beginning here, so you can click on it, and you will end up with a bunch of those themes that you can use for your presentation, or you can customize your own theme, right? That's something you can do. And how we can customize our own themes, it's where you need to learn CSS. That's the way if you want to learn how to customize your themes, because it takes the theme, and if you need any customization, you need to present that file to it. And for your question, the logo, they take a logo element here, so you can pick up the logo and in a picture format, and you then you can it will appear in that at the corner. If you want it in other places, that's need to be tweaked in CSS file format. The other thing that we saw is the code highlighting, and how we can increment it. It's really those two elements here that shows the code highlighting, but we will go back to the template.qmd to show specific code highlighting elements. We do have the footer here, that if you want to add something, a footer notes, or some statement that you wanted to appear on the run, you can add it from here. It's a footer. And there's something called slide level. Now, in slides, how you can separate different slides. Either you can use the hashtag or the header bound, or if you do it as a slide level 0 and go back here, this means this no longer will separate the slides, and the separation will be in terms of 3 dashes. 3 dashes will separate the slide. If it's level 1, then means we need those bounds to separate the slides. So you can say introduction or whatever it is, and that's how you can separate the slide. But I prefer side level 0, because you will able to create those large text number 1, and I think that it's more flexible than using the pound or the hashtag there. For the code or code highlighting, you can, Emma talked about inserting the code. So here you can insert it, you can hide it, and you can do different stuff with it, including figure caption or figure citation as well. And again, I want to point out for the figure citation. So if we add label here, and we call it figure 1, and let me create a new slide here, and in the previous slide, we can see. Now here you can change your figure name if you don't want it to appear as a figure, and you can call it something else, graph, right? No one uses it anymore, but you can use graph here. So you can say graph big 1. So again, remember the minus sign that will override all your defaults in your document, at least for naming for that, for cross-referencing. And let's add just a small caption here. Oh, that's a concentration time profile. And let's render this. I'm gonna open it from here and refresh it. So you can see it here. It's now graph 1 instead of figure 1. So you can see here, we have the, it didn't change the figure here yet because that's also need to be customized. But for the inline cross-referencing, you can change that as well. Go ahead, Sam. You can, let's try it. A good question, but let's try it. So Sam was asking about if we have a figure, but we want to reference it before the figures appear, right? So if we do it, and yes, the short answer is yes, you can do that. So let's do, let me copy this. And do it here, yes. And let's go back to here. So let me go back, and you can see it, it's graph one here. And I'm not sure why it's not taking you, but it should take you to that figure in the next one. But you can reference it, and I think this is really important in terms of when you are dealing with reports, right? When you want to keep referencing all that elements. So because how that work, if we think about, let's go back to the mental model for Quarto, how that work. It starts with the engine, so it's collect all these source codes, render them, then takes out these documentation and put them all together at there. So yeah, for cross-referencing, it doesn't matter where it is. How much we have? 10 minutes or less? 4. Okay. So this is any question about slides or customization? And okay, please. Oh yeah, you can do that. So you can do it either in template QMD. Oh, this is not the one I want. So sorry, this is the old one. Let me open. This is the one. So you can see here, it's when I do it, it's called fold, it's shown, but you can just hide it. And if we actually, let's keep it here, and we can change it in the template. So keep it as a global, but whatever you add here, it's going to override that. So let me see. If we say code fold, you can true, false. Usually I will do true. And if we render this, so it's going to fold it. Let me refresh this. So by default, it's going to be folded by default. So yeah. And if you want to change this customization, again, because if you know CSS, HTML, you can get into those stuff and change it as you see it fit. I will take the last 10 minutes to show if, for example, you don't want to work with QMD files. You want to work with R scripts, Julia scripts, Python scripts, and you want at the end of those to create them as a documents. Let's create, yes, yeah, of course. So you will have the HTML, or you can do it as HTML, send as HTML, or you can publish it there's something called Posit Connect where you can publish and get a link for that specific slide and share it with others, or you can save it as PDF. If we look here, no, let me render it again. And I'm gonna open it here. So see this here, not sure what to call it, hamburger. I know some people call it hamburger. But if we click on this or sandwich, there is some options here. You will have, this is the slides, the elements of the slides. You will have tools if you wanted full screen, speaker view, or you can have a PDF export mode. Then you can export it and share it. Hopefully I answered your question. Perfect. Yes, you can create PowerPoints, but again, I'm going to circle back. Microsoft Word and PowerPoint is not that much customizable because the way they were built, it's not built on HTML. It's not built on LaTeX. So they have their own XML version. So that's why it's very hard to customize it. But if you want to have it like just a PowerPoint without any customization, yes, you can do. For example, here, I'm going to create another Quarto document, and you can go to presentation, and you can select PowerPoint. So if you select PowerPoint here, it's going to create it as a PowerPoint. I'm going to show you the how that will look like. So I'm not going to change anything here. I'm going to save it to PPT. Yeah, because I don't want to mess up the extension. And let's render it. Because I don't have PowerPoint on this device, but hopefully the idea is there. So, sorry? Oh yeah, of course. So I can add, yeah, you can add whatever you want. So if you want to include those other codes, and actually it will include the code for you as well. Exactly, exactly. So if you want to create all your figures, and then you start modification on your PowerPoint. Perfect. Any other question? Please, right. Yes, yes, most of the time. There's like some change, difference in the naming. Like in terms of the format, are Markdown do output? Does that? When you do like, you want the output to be PDF, HTML, that's how our Markdown. Um, okay. Yes, yes, yes. That's all. Actually, it's much more efficient than our Markdown. Let me show you. Let me go back to the template here and say, I'm going to say question. Here, right? I'm just going to add an element here to the header here. I'm going to call it question, and I'm going to call it anything, question 1, right? And you can have it here in the introduction by using the 2 curly brackets and call it meta question. So this should please give you the elements for it. So you will have those parameters here. Yes. So you can have it like this, and it's really, and there's the other things. It's called variables. There's the metadata to how to access those elements. So yes, they are parameterized documents. But that's a great question. Okay, so now I'm gonna move to how to deal with R scripts. And I'm going to go to something called scripts here and just create an R script. And again, Sam will teach more about, I'm raising the bar, Sam, so high expectation for tomorrow. Perfect. Perfect. So now let's call it example one. So usually you have an R script, you can say x equal 5, print x, and you can run those, right? This is how usually you do with R, and you assign variable and print it x. But how about I want this by the end of my analysis to be a document by itself. So in RStudio, what you can do is start by comments. It should be all comments. So if we start by the comment in R or the pound or hashtag, whatever you call it, and with apostrophe. So this means anything afterward, it's gonna be interrupted by Quarto. So, and the regular thing. So if we start by title, my R script, I need it in a PDF format, and the date is last modified, or today, as Emma showed out. So you can, what we can do here, the R markdown, like for example, if I'm thinking, I want to create a figure, right? One document, one script that create a figures. So if we create, let me call it equal false. And again, see, we don't, what you are doing here is just the chunk elements for R. Chunk element. In QMD file, you are adding these chunks here. Like it's fenced within those 3 apostrophes, and you put it. But in our scripts, you usually keep it the same way. So I'm going to copy all this and go to example.r and paste it here. And if now the thing here, you need to render this in the terminal. So if in RStudio itself, there's something called terminal. You can see it from here. If it's not showing up, you can go to view, I think, somewhere here. Show terminal. Okay, I don't know where it should appear, but if it's not there, you can look around in the view that could appear, like show the terminal. But by default, it should be there. Now, if I want to render this, what you can do is Quarto render the script file. So if I did example.r, now because this is not a LaTeX workshop, but how Quarto do PDF is through something called LaTeX, which is a PDF rendering engine, and this is one of the oldest PDF rendering. Donald Knuth came up with the TIC, and that was later developed to LaTeX, and that's where all the magic happened in terms of creating PDFs. So if I open this example.r, you can see my script, and you will have the figure. And if you want to be only the figure, you can just get rid of the equal false. I'll put it as equal false, and you will have the figure, so you can distribute that figure. So it's really like it does give you what you need to do in terms of working with either R script, or you want specific, like, yeah, I want to work with Markdown, QMD, Quarto document to do all the analysis. Or if you have a bunch of those R scripts and you want to create them as a document, you will have the ability to do that. Because, for example, if you have like a main file, and you can just keep sourcing our codes from different files, and you will have at least at the end one document that can do that all things for you. Now I'm going to show you not only for R, there is also something for different languages. I did because of the time, I did it in in Julia here. The difference between R and Julia or Python, because Julia and Python are based on a Jupyter engine, so there's the syntax slightly different. So with the YAML header here, we start with the hashtag and 2% sign, but we need to add markdown in the brackets that at least the Quarto will interrupt this. This is a markdown syntax. Ignore it. It's not Python or Julia syntax. Yeah, keep going with that. And if you have a code, you started the same way. If you started with the hashtag and 2% sign, and you start writing your code. This is one example. Just using the similar thing where echo equal true, and then I'm using some Julia code here. I'm just requesting a plots library, and then I'm gonna talk more about what is this library is for. So exploring anything here, like you start with again markdown, and if you want to have multiple lines, you can put it here in the triple quotation and add whatever you want inside it here, because this is just interrupted as a text. And this is again the example that Sam's asked about. The plot appears below the citation of the plot, because you can see here, see figure 1, and the figure is created here again. So if we want to render this, make sure you have Julia or Python. If you are using those in your analyses, make sure they are installed in your computer, and you can do it the same. Quarto, render, where is it, in the solution? So again, see, it creates not our markdown, it creates something called IPyNP, which is IPython notebook that is based on Jupyter, and that's how Quarto deals with it. So if we look at example 3.pdf, we will have the document here with the random picture and the citation. It's not only PDF, but I'm a big fan of PDF documents, probably because of Stockholm syndrome with LaTeX. But yeah, I'm a big fan of PDF, but you can, it's not PDF. You can do it as HTML, or if you created your own extension. For example, if you guys at Mitram have, like, you want to create your own slides, you can create your own extensions and move forward. Or really, that's you the sky's the limit, I guess, with Quarto. I have 5 minutes. I just wanna. Sorry, Sarah. I know because the room is booked after, right? At 4? Okay. So I just wanna wrap up here the slides. So about the general resources here, we can see I put like slides for general resources. Thanks to Emma as well. She added uh, these great references. And if you want, these are already created reports and tips. So they are created from vanilla. They are extensions that you can use or modify. It's open source. Please feel to take it down, do whatever you want with those reports. The Quarto tips, that is the one that was a talk in RN Pharma conference last year. So it does have a lot of functionality in terms of how to deal with reports. The others are references. And again, Quarto.org website do have a lot of documentation, and they are easy to get the information from it. With the fuzzy finder, whatever you are thinking about, you can start typing it, and it should appear while you're typing and finding others. The other thing, the community is large, and they are really opening. So if you have any question, you can go to Quarto. Let me show you where. So I'm going to add this link as well. So, but if we can go to Quarto, GitHub, there is something called discussions here. And if you didn't find it in their website, you can start typing it here. They have like a lot of questions, and people really respond super quickly there. So you can have the information as needed with those resources. I think now we're gonna come to a conclusion here that Quarto is awesome, right? So if we talk about reproducibility and maintainability, those are really the core element I really like about Quarto. You can customize it as much as you need based on your based on your need, based on what you want to do with these documents, and productivity. Really, if you probably will take some time to create your own template, but afterward it's going to be just rendering and changing some of those parameter values, right? And questions?
Thank you, Dr. Jaber and Dr. Hughes, for the wonderful tutorial. We're open for questions.
Is there any online questions? Let me check. That's what I found, so sorry. Hopefully, right?
Then they'll have questions. So, great. You'll make, do we have a copy of the slides or?
Oh, of course, yeah. I
Minutes when
put
you're
it the
done.
link, but I'm gonna send you the slides. Please share it with the
And we'll
rest.
post the video.
Thank you
or make the
for
video available
listening.
too. So,
Thank you so much.
thank you. Thank you all for joining us. Thank our speakers again. So this concludes today's session. Again, thanks everyone for coming and sticking through to the end to hear the Quarto tutorial.